At this point, The Flash has had 6 full seasons. Well, not full because the last one was cut a little bit short, but it has had 6 seasons, and over the course of those seasons, they have produced 133 episodes. That's a lot of episodes just to choose 10 from, but that's what I'll be doing in this video, choosing my 10 favorite episodes, the 10 episodes that I consider to be the best from the show ever. Now, obviously, there will be a difference in opinion between me and you and then the rest of the people who are watching this video, so if your opinion is different, if you disagree with my list in any way, make sure to leave your list in the comments down below. With that in mind, let's start with the 10th best episode of The Flash, moving our way up to the best.
Ability to destroy the city.
The Trickster! Are you familiar with the movie Speed? You go below 600 miles per hour, it'll explode.
I can't run forever!
It will blow if you stop moving.
Run, 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 run!
Seeing as this episode at face value is nothing more than just the Flash going up against a villain of the week, it's insane how good this episode is because if you look at it, there's a lot more to it. First of all, that villain of the week is maybe the best villain of the week ever, or at least one of the best recurring villains on the show ever, as Mark Hamill gives a very good performance as the Trickster. There's also a lot of amazing moments, like emotional moments with Henry Allen, which was one of the highlights of Season 1, and that includes this episode. Barry learning how to phase was awesome as well, and in my opinion, the highlight of the episode, the entire backstory of the night Nora Allen died and how Eobard Thawne got stranded in the 21st century. It's not only very, very interesting to watch, but also has a lot of disturbing moments, like how Eobard took over Harrison's life and how it all led to that. It was an amazing episode, in an episode that doesn't look like it should have been that good. It really was.
What cost?
Oh my god.
It cannot be stopped!
What did you do?
He's being erased from existence.
Who are you?
It's me, Ma. It's Barry.
Season 1 is pretty universally agreed upon to be the strongest season of The Flash, and the season finale is no exception. The season built up the rivalry between Barry and Thawne amazingly, perfectly well, as when it gets to this point, the rivalry is just so good that it doesn't really matter what they do with it. It's going to end up being a good episode, like the payoff to that, but they also paid off pretty perfectly with this final showdown. There's also the season-long storyline, which was also perfect in Season 1, and again, perfectly paid off in this episode. It also helps that there are a lot of great emotional moments, and there's also an amazingly exciting cliffhanger in the end. And while this isn't my favorite season finale, I do understand why a lot of people consider it to be the best season finale of the show, because it does a lot of things right.
Create when I run.
Don't race him.
And wait for him to kill somebody else? No. I want him to suffer for everything that he's done.
You want revenge? If that's why you're doing this, you will lose.
While Fast Enough is great, my personal favorite season finale of The Flash is this one from Season 2. Barry and Zoom did have a similarly amazing rivalry, and while it's not as good as the one with Reverse Flash, I don't think that really means much because they're both really great rivalries, and similarly, the season-long storyline was really, really good, and both things were paid off perfectly well in this season finale. The episode also had a very emotional death, which was the death of Henry Allen, and overall served as a very satisfying ending to the season. The main reason I like this episode maybe just a little bit more than the Season 1 finale, and really the difference is very minimal in which one I prefer, but the reason this one it takes the edge is the cliffhanger, as this scene is maybe the most exciting moment on the show ever, and while it wasn't paid off well in Season 3, that's not at the fault of this episode, so I think it's one of the best episodes of the show ever.
You look scared. You should be. It is the end of the world.
What's happening?
He wants to take control of you. It's up to you to resist him.
There's a way to save the world and still survive.
All you have to do is choose life.
This episode was such a breath of fresh air and a show that really hadn't had a truly amazing episode in almost 2 years. Bloodwork, or Ramsey Rosso, definitely proves himself as one of the best villains on the show, and he proves himself in this episode as he infects Barry and puts him through a sort of trip of sorts, trying to take him over. This whole sequence of events is very visually impressive, it successfully tugs at a lot of heartstrings, and it's very, very intense, all leading to this episode's cliffhanger, leading into the second part of this two-parter, and it all culminates into, in my opinion, the best episode of Season 6, not counting the crossover, and one of the best episodes of the show ever. It was just such a breath of fresh air because the show, I don't think, really had this good of an episode in a very, very long time.
Buffet makes them better. I'm Oliver Queen. I'm Barry.
Barry, did you time travel again?
No, I didn't.
Sorry, I was talking to Barry.
I am Barry.
Something is wrong with reality. Everyone thinks we're each other.
Elseworlds was a truly great crossover, but it's in the first part that it truly shines. Episode 2 and 3 have their moments and are definitely a lot of fun, but it's part 1 that is just the best that we've gotten from that crossover, and one of the best crossover episodes ever. The body swap is what really got this episode, and what really made this episode so good. Barry and Oliver switching bodies made for some of the most fun interactions we've ever gotten in the Arrowverse. Previously and to this point, it probably brings about the most fun interactions we've ever seen. And on top of that, seeing Green Arrow and the Flash finally teaming up with Superman along with Supergirl is awesome, especially since they team up against Amazo, an iconic Justice League villain, all making this really feel like a Justice League team up, something that they've never really felt like before. Even in Crisis on Earth X, where we had so many heroes, the lack of Superman mainly is what made it feel less like a Justice League, but in this episode specifically, they do have that, and it's so much fun to watch. There's also some subtle Crisis build-up and some Monitor-related stuff that make all of those things just make this such a fun episode, and such a great crossover episode overall, but not just that, a great episode of The Flash.
I have to be ready to face him.
I promise you, Barry Allen, you will die.
Then face me now! Help me! Let him go.
Oh my god!
Like I said earlier, the season-long storyline of The Flash Season 1 is easily the best one we've seen on the show, and most of the story is paid off in this episode, or at least it builds up to this episode. This episode deals with everything finally coming together, everything for Team Flash and Eobard Thawne and even Eddie Thawne and all of those things coming together. It all comes together in this episode, and it makes for one of the most intense episodes we've ever seen on the show, and they pull it off perfectly well, making this episode another one that doesn't seem like it would be anywhere up there. It's not a special type of episode, like it's not the ending of a season, the beginning of the season, the middle of the season. It's just like, it's episode 20, and it's not really what you would expect to be such a good episode, but it is one of the best episodes of the show ever, as it is incredibly intense, and it pays off everything that builds up to it perfectly well.
Tomorrow, it's more action,
I don't have time for this.
more heroes,
Someone call for backup.
What do you need from me? Serve your higher purpose. And one more shot.
This is the only Earth left. It's time for Flash to vanish.
This might not be a popular opinion, but I absolutely loved Crisis on Infinite Earths. Every part except for part 2 was really good, like almost a 10 out of 10. Part 3 is maybe the best out of these episodes that it has so many great things about it. The whole Earth 90 Flash storyline worked perfectly, as it served as the emotional element of the story of the episode, and the death of Earth 90 Flash and the whole vanishing Crisis thing, I think it works really well. But easily the best part of this episode is the ending cliffhanger, which is intense and unexpected, and not how I expected the episode to go down, and an incredibly well done Infinity War-like cliffhanger that, again, I did not expect them to ever get to that. I didn't think they would ever do something like that. So that is something that really elevated this episode. But even without that, it's a really good episode, and it's a lot of fun, and even fairly emotional.
It's too dangerous, right?
Maybe if she didn't scream every time she fired.
Take my emblem, throw it through the breach. Zoom will come to collect my body, and we can travel.
When looking at intense moments of the show, nothing really ever comes close to the first fight between the Flash and Zoom. It's like a couple minutes at the end of this episode, but just those couple of minutes make this the third best episode of the show ever. The rest of the episode is not bad whatsoever, but it's also not really anything special. It's just that it perfectly serves as the calm before the storm, the calm being the first 30 minutes of the episode, and the storm being some of the most intense moments we've ever gotten from the show, the fight between the Flash and Zoom. It's an amazing first introduction to Zoom, at least to the characters of the show, and to Flash. It's a great way to show how menacing he is, how scary he is, and again, it's just incredibly intense, and that was just only a couple of minutes that made this one of the best episodes of the show ever.
Can't believe this. Dr. Wells had something to do with Barry's mom's murder.
He's in a wheelchair? How could he possibly have done that? You're smart. You're not that smart.
This episode is the highest rated episode of the show ever and has been since it aired over 5 years ago, and it is actually easy to see why. The episode has basically everything: incredibly epic moments, an emotional death with Cisco, which was completely unexpected, something that you would never think they would do. I'll get to that in a second, but this episode also has incredibly satisfying payoff through a lot of the season's build-up, some of the most intense scenes we've ever seen, and like I said, incredibly unexpected moments. Things that you wouldn't really think they would ever do, because these things are off limits, like paralyzing David Singh, killing Cisco Ramon just out of nowhere, revealing everything to Team Flash that they know already in episode 15. It's not really things that you would expect to see, but that's because they reset everything in the end. Something that could have come off as cheap came off as the perfect ending to this episode because of the foreshadowing in the beginning of the episode, because of the comic book history of the Flash's time travel abilities, and because of the overall epicness of the Flash unlocking those abilities. It doesn't come off as cheap at all. It comes off as like that's what was supposed to happen from the beginning, but with that they were able to do so many things that they could never do in this episode, and that is what really makes this episode the best episode of the show ever, except for one other that I personally consider to be better, but it seems like, at least on IMDb, this is the fan favorite episode. This is the episode that most people consider to be the best.
It's super speed. As soon as I stop moving, it's game over. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. Iris,
What?
I don't know what to do.
My opinions have not changed about what the best episode of the show ever is since the last time I made this type of video, as Under Flashtime is everything I ever wanted to see in a Flash TV show before the show ever came out. It's really the only episode that shows the true power of the Flash, like in Justice League Unlimited, where the Flash runs around the world, takes out Lex Luthor / Brainiac. It was in that moment where the Flash became one of my favorite characters, like favorite fictional characters ever, and that's not something they ever really were able to recreate on the show. That feeling of the Flash's power, that is until this episode, as the Flash his power is shown off in such an incredible way. Along with that, Enter Flashtime is probably the most visually impressive episode of the show ever, as every single shot is just chock full of color and vibrancy that yet again no other episode comes even close to. This episode is I admit not as intense as Out of Time or Enter Flashtime, but not only does that not really mean anything, because the intensity is not everything in a show, but also it's not like it lacks intensity. It does have a lot of intense moments. I don't think I will ever change my mind on Enter Flashtime being my favorite episode of the show ever, as it is the most visually impressive. It shows off the Flash's powers in a way that no other episode comes close to. It's easily the most cinematic, and something that I haven't even touched yet is that it has probably the most satisfying ending to a conflict that an episode of the show has ever had, and all of that comes together to make my favorite episode of the show. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what your list is, what your favorite episode is. Is it Enter Flashtime, Out of Time, Enter Zoom? It could be anything except for some of the worst episodes that I might probably get to in a different video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.